Welcome to the conversation. I am Hassan Khan, and today we have Mr. Atif Aqeel, co-founder at Mabrook Financials. Mr. Atif is a licensed Canadian architect, a real estate development professional, and the founder and principals of AAA Architects. Academically, he holds Masters in Business Administration in Finance and Banking from the American University of Sharjah. His experience speaks for itself, and I must say that he is a humble and delightful soul. Without further ado, let's gain insight into his unique perspective and how he brings it all together. So, Mr. Atif, let's start by sharing how it all begins.
It's been an interesting journey. I mean, to give you a bit of background, I actually grew up in Dubai. So I think, if you look at my profile, you can see that too. And, I did architecture. I went to a very prestigious university, which is called the American University of Sharjah. And what was interesting about that and why that was important for my journey is that we had, it was a private university owned by the Sheikh of Sharjah, the ruler of Sharjah. And he spared no expense, to make sure that university was one of the top universities, which it is now in the Middle East. So the university hired professors from Ivy League schools. So we were actually taught by professors from MIT, Harvard, even Oxford, Cambridge. Like globally, they went and sourced some of the best people to teach at this university. So what was good was it gave us all of us who were there at that time and even now, a very good foundation in architecture, which was very unique in the Middle East at that point. But what was going on in the Middle East? Because I studied architecture from 97 to 2002. So it was a 5-year program back then. And so the United Arab Emirates, Dubai, UAE, all of that, all that, region was going through a very, very phenomenal real estate boom in the early 2000s. And there's a whole story about why that happened, which, I could get into, but as you know, and you're from the region, this was a great time to be an architect. But what was interesting is, my actual background before I went into architecture was actually in investment banking because my father was an investment banker for most of his life. And when I was, I was 15, 16, I used to intern at Lehman Brothers, which was a very big bank back in the days. And coincidentally is a very infamous bank because it was involved in the world financial crisis meltdown in 2008. But it was back then in the 80s and 90s and whatnot, one of the largest investment banks in the world. And so I used to work there every summer as a student, and I used to work in the world of finance, learning how to trade options, derivatives. Actually, I could, analyze charts as early as 16. And most of my family actually are business people. So my grandfather was a businessman. My uncles had their own businesses and whatnot. So we come from a business family. We're a business-oriented family. So one of the reasons I did a master's in business was primarily initially, for my father. But when I went into the business school after architecture, I had an interest in Islamic financing. So back in the day, Islamic finance, in the early 2000s was also a very big thing because everybody was interested in Islamic finance. Dubai was becoming an Islamic finance capital in the world. So I ended up in my thesis in my master's was actually about an Islamic finance product. So it gave me a very good understanding of Islamic finance and architecture because I was at the right place at the right time. So what you ask, why did I, the development of, leading to me starting my own business, because I was from a business oriented family, I had it in me. Like I just never wanted to work for somebody my whole life. My journey in life has primarily been self-taught. A lot of us, we look for people, to take us on, to teach us things, to to show us the way. I don't know, for some reason in my life, I've never really had that sort of mentor that will show me the way. I've always wanted one, which is really interesting. But because of that, I've always been the person to take on the lead. Even in university, I used to take the lead on everything, and because of that, I had my hands tied in so many things, from the drama club, being captain of one of the sports teams, being an MC at events, always trying to lead and doing things. And so, when you have that sort of mindset, it's very hard for you to continue to be under someone else. You really want to do things when you see something's being done wrong, or something. I wouldn't say wrong, but you see something that can be done better, or you see a better vision. Instead of somebody showing you how to do it, you just take initiative and you just do it. Because there's no better way to do something than to just than just going out and doing it. Instead of just waiting for someone to give you an opportunity, sometimes you just get up and say, okay, you know what, I see a vision in this, and I'm just going to go ahead and do it. And if I fail, I fail. But if I don't fail, at least, but if I don't succeed as the way I wanted to, at least I learned something, and even if I fail, I learned something. So, that basically is how things started. I worked for 2 years as an architect for somebody else in Dubai, and Dubai was booming. And I knew that if I don't, get in on the action right now, I may not never have an opportunity like this again, because I was in my 20s, and so, being so young, I said, you know what, I'm going to take a risk in my 20s, and I'm going to start an architectural practice. And, alhamdulillah, thanks to Allah, everything comes together through Allah's will. I had good connections, through my university. I knew this friend of mine who we went to school with, and he happened to be from a very influential Emirati family, and they had lots of land, and Dubai was booming, and they wanted to develop this land. So we set up a company. We set up a couple of companies: a real estate development company, a property management company, and an architectural design and engineering practice. And the whole idea was to basically take the family's assets, analyze them from a business perspective to make sure, do a feasibility study to see, okay, what should we build on this site? What will make the most sense? What sort of revenues can we generate? And alhamdulillah, the market was so good. No matter what we did, it was successful. And that's, again, part of, Allah's blessing on us at that time. But yeah, basically that's how it all started, so.
Thank you for sharing your remarkable journey, sir. It's interesting to see how you made the shifts in your career life cycle. Your decision to co-found Mabrook is quite captivating. Could you elaborate on the factors that influence you to choose to be a part of Mabrook?
There's a number of things that draw me to Al Mabrook. First, I think, the model, first of all, I think is very good because it allows for, so you're basically a blockchain model. You're trying to bring down some of these barriers to investment, right? So you're also tokenizing investment, which also allows people who may not necessarily have huge amounts of capital to invest in something that traditionally has required a large amount of capital to invest in. And, this is an issue that, a lot of people who are, they want to earn good returns, but, to earn good returns, as they say, money attracts money. So when you get to a certain scale of, let's say, net worth, then you can start making some serious money, right? People who have millions of dollars or multi-millions of dollars are able to actually go after assets and do things which people who don't have that kind of resource and capital cannot. And that's true even in real estate. It's true in many businesses and whatnot. I think Mabrook, with its model, one of its advantages is that it opens up this opportunity to invest in things which would not necessarily be within your reach by this tokenization model. And the blockchain method also helps break down, let's say, even borders. Like you can invest from anywhere with ease. And I think that is a big advantage of Mabrook. But for me also, as a person who's in the industry of architecture, real estate development, and whatnot, I think Mabrook is a good fit because a lot of times to have a successful venture, you need to have control over your entire supply chain, what we call being vertically integrated. And I think in real estate development, finance and financing projects is a very important critical part of that supply chain. And by Mabrook fits in very well because then it allows us to expand and provide better real estate development projects because we have control over the financing aspects of it. And because of its Sharia compliant model, we don't have to worry about, okay, do I have to go to a bank and get money on interest? Do I have to contend with that while trying to earn a return that I want to? So I think there's a number of things that are a good fit, that Mabrook is a good fit for this particular model of real estate development.
My next question is about your role at Al Mabrook. Considering your background in the business-oriented family, early exposure to investment banking, and your pursuit of master's degree in architecture, which has accumulated in your current entrepreneurial endeavors. Now, as a co-founder of Mabrook, how do you envision your role evolving and contributing to the company's future?
I think when you say, how do I portray it moving forward? It's a good question. I think I bring a versatile knowledge base to Mabrook because when I'm doing a project, even when I'm doing as an architect, purely as an architect, when I'm doing projects for my clients, because, obviously I have my other ventures, as you know, but let's say if someone hires me as an architect for a real estate development venture, I can put on different hats. So I can go in the early stages of the project and go to a client and say, you know what, by the way, you bought this land for, I don't know, X amount of dollars. Have you thought about, what the current market capitalization rate is, on, let's say, this kind of asset class? In real estate, we have asset classes, right? So you have commercial products, residential products, mixed use products, rental products. So these are all sort of, different types of assets in real estate. So let's say if they're doing a rental building and they want to do a residential rental building, they may think, oh yeah, the rental market looks good, but they may not know what the current cap rate is or capitalization rate is in the particular market, demographic or geographic the geographic market that they're in. So I put on that investment hat and I go like, okay, let's go look at what the current capitalization rate is for this kind of product. And then I can help them. I backtrack those numbers and I go like, okay, your current capitalization rate for this particular type of product is maybe 5%. So if we were to earn a 5% cap rate, what kind of numbers should we be at? What kind of construction costs should we be at? What kind of density in terms of number of units or square footage should we be at for you to be able to achieve that? Because if you just go ahead and build it and you don't meet what the market demands of you, your project might look pretty, it may be beautiful, but it may not be successful as a financial venture. And, that's how, I guess I portray that to Mabrook as well, that, our group, other people have also other expertise, but my particular expertise when it comes to any kind of project, like if let's say Mabrook is not going to be just for real estate, right? It's going to be for everything. And I think that's the kind of knowledge that we need to bring before we even value investments. Like, let's say we are presented with an investment opportunity, Mabrook. Before we even take it to our investors, we need to do that due diligence, right? We need to look at whether this is a successful venture. And I think that's where all of that knowledge comes in, right? So it sort of comes in and, tomorrow, let's say we want to buy a company. So we need to look at, from the financial markets perspective, what if we were to take this company public? So what kind of metrics should we be looking at? Is this a manufacturing business? What kind of financial metrics that you look at in stock markets? If you want to buy a stock, you would look at certain metrics. You would look at its valuation. You would look at its free cash flow. You would look at its assets and liabilities. You would look at its complete balance sheet, right? When you're doing an analysis, whether a stock is undervalued or overvalued, we would use those exact same metrics, right? In making those decisions. So really, that's where that comes in, right?
Yeah, I think thank you very much. Seems like you are an all-rounder. Managing multiple projects and ensuring their timely completion is undoubtedly a significant challenge. We are all aware of the demanding roles and responsibilities that comes with it. I want you to share a particular experience or accomplishment that stands out.
Certainly. I mean, in my if I can call it my day job, my current ventures. So we do real estate development management for other clients, and so in Waterloo, the city of Waterloo, over the past 5-6 years, we've done a number of projects like this, where actually they're student rental housing projects, because Waterloo is a student town. So there's about 2 universities and a college, and so we've delivered some very successful projects, both architecturally, but also from a financial perspective. And how we did this is we did a couple of buildings where architecturally we did something very different. So we were actually recognized by not only the city of Waterloo, but the architectural practice was recognized by, there's an entity called Construct Canada. There's actually a annual conference that takes place in Toronto, here in Canada. And so they recognized our practice for, let's say, a very good and efficient design, excuse me, for delivering a very good and efficient design for our projects. And one particular project, which was 222 Albert Street in Waterloo, Ontario, got a prize, or was winner in one of the categories. But that project was very good from a design perspective. So even the city acknowledged it, but its true success was how it was actually built. So how it was delivered. And our firm, we actually came up with a financial idea, which was, okay, how do we deliver this project so quickly, and so that the interest cost and whatnot can be minimized? Because this was a regular project. So it was, and the financing was regular. This is not from Mabrook. And our client also, was not Muslim, so they didn't really care much about Islamic financing and whatnot. So they were trying to minimize their carrying cost, as it's called, on the project, and they were also trying to reduce the amount of time so that labor costs can be reduced. Again, it was all about the bottom line. So, and about also the fact that they had to finish the project by a certain time, because if this was student rentals, so that come September, first week of September, Labor Day, when universities and colleges open in Canada and the US, they have to be ready before that, so that the students can move in. So we had time against us. We had to minimize labor costs, and because labor cost is very high here in Canada and in the US, and also reduce interest carrying costs. So what we did is we designed this entire project. Every major element was designed using precast, and even the exterior walls, which are typically not done in precast, like exterior finished assembly, was done in precast, so that the whole building could be put up very quickly. So it was put up. It was a larger project, so it was about it was about 12 stories, more than 100 units, and it was done in about 7 to 8 months. Which actually a comparable project would take about 18 months. It was done about almost half the time. So there was huge savings. And then the other thing we did is, this was supposed to be a furnished project. So because it was student rental, furnished student rentals. So what we also did is we leveraged our knowledge of the supply chain to source suppliers from China for things which did not require Canadian certifications. So we imported furniture, we had kitchen cabinets, we had all kinds of items, which significantly saved the cost, but we were able to actually even find suppliers that were able to do it quickly and at a very, very good price. So, this is not something that you would expect an architect to do. This is a total managed solution, right? So, you have basically an end product that meets those financial goals. So yeah, we did that one project, and then we got about another 4 projects like that. So, and they were all very successful. And the capitalization rates on those projects was, very good compared to what the market was, which actually means that when the project was finished and, this particular person had to go from a construction loan to now what's called a takeout financing, they actually had equity in their project already before they even, started, which was very good, which means they built the project, made money on the project, and still owned the project, and were getting an income for the project. So that's actually a very good model, and a good position to be in.
Thank you very much, Mr. Atif. This actually encourages me to ask you, for someone who has thrived in both project management and businesses, what advice would you offer to aspiring architects or individuals who are seeking to embark their own entrepreneurial journey?
The biggest advice I can give anybody is to not be afraid. I think fear is one of those things that holds us all back. We're always afraid. We're afraid of failure, afraid of rejection, afraid of, what other people think. We all have so many fears, and it is that fear that keeps us from living our life. It can manifest itself in many things. It could be in something you want to, may it be personal or work related. So the first thing that holds us back is fear, because fear, has this effect of paralyzing us. So my first advice is, you have to really get over fear of failure and rejection, or whatever may apply, whether it's fear of failure or fear of rejection. Because at the end of the day, both those fears, failure and rejection, within them is hidden an element of other people. At the end of the day, if you want to be successful at anything, it is you that you're answerable to, right? That you have to work. So if it's something that you want, you shouldn't be afraid to go after it, right? You should try to pursue it. And the second advice I can give you is, don't look or wait for others to tell you what to do. If in your heart you know that this is what needs to be done, just go and do it. Like, a lot of people talk, but they don't want to do, right? Because it's difficult to do, but easier to talk. As they say, talk is cheap, right? So yeah, basically it's just going and doing it, right? Like, I tell you, when I moved to Canada, which I didn't talk about in my part of the story, from the UAE, it was very difficult because, they do not recognize international credentials here that easily. International experience is not, accepted at all. So when I moved here, I actually had to start from the bottom. And I worked here for about 3 years as well when I moved from Dubai. Um, and so when I did that, after 3 years, I was promoted, and I was, at a very good role just in 3 years. That I had a very cushy, comfortable job. And so, and in life, whenever you're very comfortable and you're in your comfort zone, that means you stop learning. And that would be my third advice, is that if you think you're comfortable and everything seems good, something's wrong. Because life changes. That means you are comfortable in the way that life is going, but tomorrow when life changes, you're not going to be ready. So I put myself out of that comfort zone, left a very good job, I resigned, and I started my first business in Canada, right? So, which was a big risk at that time, because I was still in the midst of building my network, but I could see something happening, a shift in the market, you know. Um, and so if I didn't take that opportunity then, when I was still relatively younger, you know, and, risked myself to failure, I wouldn't be able to do that, so easily now in my 40s, right? So, um, again, uh, going out of your comfort zone, not being afraid, and just getting up and doing things is, I think, you know, three big pieces of advice that I would give anyone looking to do anything different or great or bigger or anything. Just get up and do it. Don't be afraid. And if you think you're comfortable, put yourself out of your comfort zone and do something that makes you uncomfortable. So you'll learn something about yourself, and you'll learn. I mean, worst case, you'll learn and you were not comfortable. Now you're going to be comfortable. So,
Thank you very much for your advice, Mr. Atif. I'm sure this will help many in taking the first step they are waiting for. Now let's turn our focus towards investment in Canada. We know that Mabrook is enabling Sharia compliant investments in Canada through tokenization, which is going to make things easier for the investors. Could you highlight some key factors that contributes to Canada's appeal as an attractive investment destination?
one of the great things about Canada is, and I say this because, I know the US as well. I've part of my family actually lives in the US. They say the Canada is what the US used to be in the 80s and 90s. It's a country that is very welcoming and open to everybody. And the US used to be like that in the 80s and 90s. There was a huge push towards people wanting to move to the US. But now when you ask anybody, in the Middle East, if they had to choose between Canada and the US, they would choose Canada. Canada just saw 1 million immigrants. Our population crossed 40 million, and it's growing at an exponential rate. So, what makes Canada attractive is a number of things. I mean, people are coming here for a number of things. A lot of people are escaping persecution somewhere else, so they're coming here for the personal freedoms and whatnot. But at the same time, it's also a very welcoming country. It welcomes everybody. There's the amount of discrimination that you would find in other parts of the world, even in places like, I wouldn't say discrimination, but there are issues the US and Europe also have. A lot of those issues don't exist in Canada. We are a very free and open society, and a lot of people like that, and that draws them to Canada. I think our prime minister a few years ago, when we had and I'm not going to talk about politics about who's right and wrong because I'm a very neutral person, but we know that south of the border in the US, a few years ago, we had a different administration. And, whatever reason, they had an anti-immigrant stance. But our government here took the stance that, we will welcome everybody. And that kind of reminded me of, the Statue of Liberty, I think, has this sort of, quote on it. I think, "Give me your tired," and something like that. I'm trying to call what it is. It's "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, earning to breathe free." I think that's what it says, or it's a phrase that's associated with, the Statue of Liberty. So what our prime minister at that time said, I don't remember what he said, but he said something to the effect, we are open. If, let's say, the US is closed at the moment, we are open to people, right? So a lot of people, rush towards Canada. Even from within the US, we had actually, believe it or not, illegal immigration from the US to Canada. So we were like, like the Mexican border in the US, till about last year, we had a lot of people illegally cross from the US into Canada. So this sort of quote, that's attributed to the Statue of Liberty, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free," is something that became synonymous with Canada as opposed to the US, right? So that actually in itself also has contributed to a lot of people coming to Canada. as well. So, when you have an environment like this, it also now you need to house these people. You need to provide resources to these people. And Canada has been, I must say, struggling a little bit to catch up. We have such a demand for housing, but we cannot build enough housing, which means the demand for housing, retail, and all kinds of services that we need, manufacturing, is very strong. So we just don't have enough people and resources to meet the demand. So that means for years, for the next, maybe a decade or so, we're just going to be playing catch up. So in any industry, whether it's real estate or anything else, right now, we need people. We are a very immigrant friendly country. So we are getting lots of thousands and hundreds of thousands of immigrants. But as they're coming, we also have to, these people that we're bringing in, we need to house them. We need to clothe them, feed them. And so it's spurring all kinds of industries. Agriculture, we have agro businesses, creative ways of doing agriculture indoor, because you need to feed people, you need to housing. Like we are building, like our firm is so busy, even though we are in a high interest rate market, but we need to build. Our government is saying, yes, the interest rates are higher, but hey, please build housing. So they're giving incentives, they're giving very, like the government programs for people who want to pursue those, have very low interest loans for, which are below prime to build housing. So I think Canada presents a great opportunity. And the other thing that's different, though, than from emerging markets, the returns over here are different. I know in certain emerging markets, because I grew up in one, the returns were very high, right? You could get like 30, 40, 50% sometimes in a very short amount of time. Over here, you don't get those huge returns in a short amount of time, but you get them slowly and more stably. The market is stable. You don't have this big boom and bust cycle, that you have in other emerging markets because, they don't have those controls or those things that you have in Canada, which allow stability. The currency is stable. So, our currency is where it's been for the past probably even 3 decades, where of course it goes up and down with market conditions, but generally speaking, the Canadian dollar is, if you looked at where it was against the US dollar 30 years ago, we're pretty much where we were 30 years ago against the US dollar. So, there's a lot of stability in this market. So you have stability, you have safety, you have security, you have freedom, and all of these are great for investors, right? So I think from that perspective, and anybody wants to invest in Canada, especially right now, I mean, when we just we can't keep up with demand, it's a great place to invest safely, securely, for stable returns. I wouldn't say the best returns in the world, but definitely stable returns.
Thank you very much, Mr. Atif. We know that you are from the architecture background, but could you share the rationale behind selecting real estate investment as your starting point for Mabrook? Also, if you can share with us the revenue return models that you are presenting to potential investors.
So at the moment, our focus primarily is on real estate because it's a huge part of the demand gap or the supply gap, I would say, sorry, in Canada. So we're right now focusing on real estate. So we are looking at so right now we have a couple of projects that we have acquired land for. We have a rental project in the city of Hamilton that we have acquired land for. So that's a project that we are looking at right now. It's going through due diligence, so it hasn't been launched yet. But once it's ready, we'll bring it to the public once we know that it's going to get us the returns that we're looking for. We've acquired land in other places, in Niagara region, in the northern Muskoka region of Ontario, and we're looking at these as development projects. So we can either buy land, build and sell these for a profit, or we would buy, develop and hold for recurring rental revenue, because rental revenue is a great tool to generate halal, I wouldn't say fixed returns, but expected returns, because these are, instead of putting your money in a saving account where you generate interest, you can put it into rental revenue. So basically you co-own a part of the building or real estate asset, and it generates revenue, halal revenue, and you're basically getting a portion of your revenue based on the equity stake that you have in the project. So I think both of these models is what we're focusing on. So either, buy, build, sell, or buy, build, hold, and rent. So the sell model provides a return, but there's a term for the project. You start it, you invest in it. Once it's over, you get your returns. And the other one is you invest in it long term, and you get recurring returns monthly or annually or however you would.
Thank you very much for sharing the approach that you are taking. For the sake of those who are seeking more clarity, I would like to inquire, how does Mabrook typically evaluate a property or development project for investment purposes?
So that's a very good question. So what you do is basically you have to, first of all, before the acquisition, you have to look at the land. So you have to make sure that you're acquiring the land at the right price. So for that, there's a number of ways of doing it. You can look at comparables in the market. There's a number of ways to value land, right? So you can either look at comparable sales, meaning what has similar land sold for, or similar property, because a lot of times in Canada, you would buy an existing house or houses because it's you're developing in developed areas, and then you would tear it down and change the zoning and whatnot, and then build something else. So the first thing you have to do is you have to assess the value of the property that you're looking to purchase, if you're acquiring it at the right price. Once that's been identified, the second thing you need to identify before you even make a purchase is, what is it that we need to do? So for example, are we going to build a building on this site? Okay, that's great. We can then come up with a feasibility or the numbers of the building. But before you even get to the feasibility, generally speaking, can you even do the building? Because there are what are called land entitlements in place. In some countries, you call them zoning bylaws. In some countries, you call them entitlements. There are different names for these, but they're all planning, related to planning and city urban planning, as it's called. The good thing about Canada is that your entitlements for a particular land are not set in stone. So let's say right now, today, there's a house, and let's say there's an entitlement for a house. It doesn't mean that this property is going to remain a house forever. What happens is every 5 years, the municipal governments review their land entitlements, zoning, official plans or plans, long-term plans, and kind of try to identify, okay, in the past 5 years, what population growth have we had? What kind of demand do we have in the city? And where are we going in the next 5 years? So they keep updating their own policy documents for the future. Now, these are done at different levels of government. Provincial governments, because we have provinces in Canada, and then we have municipalities in Canada. We also have the federal government that oversees larger policy of immigration and whatnot. So how it works is, let's say the federal government has an immigration or employment targets for the country. Those targets filter down to different provinces. Let's say we are in Ontario, which is the largest province in terms of population, where the city of Toronto is. So our targets are different in terms of, okay, we're going to receive, let's say, the most amount of immigrants in the country. So now, but the federal government will have planning policy, which will then filter down into the provincial government, the province of Ontario will say, okay, now that we have these projections for people, jobs, infrastructure, where do we need to invest? Where will this be more useful? And where do we see these targets being more effective? So they may go, okay, we need to build a highway here, or we need to look at an industrial development on this side, because in the next 10 years, we need to figure out a solution for supply chain. We need to have a highway to connect maybe an industrial hub from here to here. And the great thing is, all of this thing is public knowledge. You can, whenever they come up with these targets and plans, it's public knowledge. You can see, okay, the government is investing in a highway, and the plan is to connect something from here to here. And that plan may not come into fruition for the next 10 years, as an example, or 5 years. But now you know where they're going. So now let's say there's a highway being built. So all the cities and municipalities that are within that highway have now a potential for connecting to this highway. So they are coming up with their own municipal guidelines and policies and whatnot to address the coming of infrastructure, whether it's a pipeline for sewage or water or gas or whatever. They're going to start to change their policies. Sometimes they may not have changed their policies, but the province has an overall plan, but the city doesn't know, okay, what should we do right now and where. There, we can go in as a developer and go to the city and negotiate and say, hey, look, there's these pieces of land or properties that we would like to buy, or we have bought, if let's say we purchased it, and we go there and say, okay, we would like to change the entitlement to build, let's say, a 10-story building, because, and then we have to make a justification. It's called planning justification. We can present, this is what's happening. This is where roads are being developed. We can go in as a private developer and tell the city why they should change the entitlement for this land here. And then we go because of A, B, C, D, E. And then if they accept our justification, they will change the entitlement of the land and give us permission to build something much more dense or higher or whatever. Actually, 90% of my work as an architect even deals with changing land entitlements. Now, what's interesting, sometimes there's more money in terms of percentage of return in changing the land's entitlements than there is in actually building the land. So, for example, you may buy a property, and this is something I just did a few months ago. A client of mine bought a property a year ago for $2 million. He bought 2 houses. In the year, we changed the entitlement to build an 8-story building with 180 units. The land value in 1 year jumped from $2 million to $7 million. So when you look at the return, that is a phenomenal return in 1 year. So if he would just take that land and just sell it without even building a building, he just made $5 million, right? Over a $2 million investment. That is phenomenal. And those are the kind of opportunities that also exist in Canada. Like changing land entitlements is where a lot of money is made in Canada. But it can take about 1 to 2 years to change entitlements. But, if you get the right entitlement in place or zoning in place, you can make a very good return in a relatively shorter time frame.
Thank you for the detailed answer. I believe you have already answered my next question, which was on navigating the regulatory and legal aspects of real estate investment in Canada.
Yeah, but I can elaborate a little bit further. You have to keep up to date.
Sure.
You have to keep, every time over here we have provincial budgets, federal budgets. Whenever they're passed, you have to read them. You have to see, okay, where's the government investing? Whenever the government comes up with a budget, they're telling you where they're investing their money. So you have to focus on that. Not just real estate. You can focus on other things, manufacturing. It could be any other industry. You have to see, okay, where are they focusing their money on? Because in the next 5 years or so, or 4 years or so, even the next year or so, you'll see activities in those sectors of the market because the government is pumping money in them. They're encouraging investment in them. Similarly, in the real estate sector as well, you have to see, you have to look at municipal budgets. You have to look at, you have to stay in touch with, regulation because it changes year by year. Things can change, As an example, just this year, the city of Toronto, as an example, to address the severe housing shortage, has allowed 4 dwelling units within 1 dwelling unit. So, which is something that was never heard of. But now that's opening up an opportunity. It's opening up an opportunity with something called garden suites, meaning in your backyard, you can put a little small cottage/shed, whatever, which you can create a small 1-bedroom or a studio/bachelor suite which you can rent out. So it opened a market for people to go and build these small modular structures and go to people and sell them en masse. And so there's things like that, right? You have to keep up to date, and you can't, like I said, it's all about going back to my comfort zone idea. You can't sit still, in life. You just cannot sit still because things are changing. Nobody, inherently, we as human beings don't like change, right? But the reality is life is nothing but change. We are young, we get older, right? And we get old, right? We are healthy, we become sicker, as we get older. Life is full of change, some pleasant, some not so pleasant, you know. We have children, those are pleasant changes, we get married, those are pleasant changes, we grow, that's a pleasant change. Some are not pleasant. So, but if you sit still thinking that life will never change, that laws will never change, regulations will never change, you are going to be out of business very quickly because you need to adapt and pivot very quickly. As an example, condos versus rentals. We used to do a lot of, condos, I must explain that. Condominium here in Canada and the US refers to units, residential units that you sell to other people in a building or in a complex are called condominium units or condos. Rental apartments is a term specifically used in Canada and the US for residential buildings which are purely for rental. So the market for condominium or condos and rental is different. It has different financial metrics and valuation techniques. For the longest, when the interest rates were lower, the best-selling product was condos because it was cheap to buy, interest rates were lower. But as soon as the interest rates went higher, the market shifted to a rental market. Now you have to build rental buildings, and they're designed differently because a lot of people cannot afford a mortgage, but they still want a place to live. So investors are investing in rental buildings. If I was a condo, specifically focusing only on condos, and I told myself, oh, the life will never change, let me just focus only on that. And now when the market shifts, you have no work. So what do you do, right? So you constantly have to be on the lookout for what is changing in the world and how it impacts you, whatever business you're doing. And I think even as Mabrook, because we are a multifaceted business, we're not a real estate development company. We are an investment company. So for us, it doesn't matter what we're investing in as long as it's halal and it's a good return, right? So for us, it's very critical to know where the world is going, where the interest rates are going, even though we may not borrow money on interest, but it impacts the economy, right? It impacts where investments are made, where's population growth, what sectors where demand is. Because tomorrow, Mabrook may invest in an agro business, right? Because we need to feed the human population. And there's a lot of creative agro businesses. Actually, just the other day, I was researching and I found this new business, which is a drone company in the US. And what they do is using drones, they spray certain pesticides to certain crops to minimize the damage that pesticides do to overall large pieces of land. It was targeted AI, using drones to target, and it's US, it's the, what's it called? It's the Food and Agricultural Department in the US. I can't remember the name right now. It's approved by them because they're like, well, this is good. Even the EPA likes it in the US because they're like, well, it's less damaging to the environment. So, these are kind of businesses, in the future that Mabrook should be on the lookout for, right? Or be investing in, because that's where the future is. And it's all because of, evolving markets, EPA regulations in the US becoming stricter, AI coming on, and changing the way we do business. So, yeah, it's just, constantly monitoring and being on the lookout.
Moving ahead, is Mabrook looking or considering possibilities of offering investment in Waqf?
Sorry, which projects? Can you repeat that?
Waqf related projects?
Yes, I think that is one of the goals of Mabrook is that a certain percentage of our revenue is dedicated towards charitable causes. But at the same time, I think Waqf projects is actually part of our goal. We do really need to give back to the Ummah. Our goal is not to be, just we are a for-profit entity, no doubt. but our goal is also to give back. So we already have in place a certain percentage of our revenue that goes towards charitable causes. But then I think Waqf is different than just pure charity. But I think definitely it is one of our objectives to be able to invest, not invest, but contribute towards that.
May Allah accept all of your efforts. Looking forward for Mabrook's more and more upcoming projects. So, could you shed light on the emerging trends in the real estate sector from an investor perspective?
For sure, certainly. So there are two areas right now which are seeing the most demand. One is industrial. We need warehouses, storage facilities, because um, we're an economy that does a lot of logistics, and with the shift towards online, uh, sales and whatnot, there's a huge warehousing demand. We need places to store products that people are buying, and right now it's almost impossible to find a reasonable warehouse anywhere in the Toronto area. There's a big demand for them. And we have what are called now industrial condos. So you basically build these smaller storage units so that people can buy them instead of renting them. And then they can buy a multiple of them to get a larger space. So you have a small office in front and storage warehouse in the back. There's just not enough. People are desperate for them because they want to grow their businesses, but they have nowhere to store products. I have somebody I know that's storing stuff in containers in a yard somewhere because he can't find a warehouse. People are getting creative. They're using barn structures in agricultural properties to store products, which are not meant for agriculture. Because it's, you can't find storage. So what do? You just get a barn in a farm and you put, I don't know, products in there. So, I mean, people are getting creative, obviously, people will always get creative when there's a shortage of things. Rental housing, not condominium, but rental housing. It's just, I cannot stress how desperately Canada needs rental housing. And the immigrants and people are coming in at a much larger rate than we can house them. If we don't build enough rental housing soon, actually we'll have a problem because, where do you house people? People, then we will not become competitive. So anything you build for rental right now, it's going to go really quickly. And if it's not geared towards affordable, then it's going to demand whatever rent you ask for. But at the same time, I think affordable housing is another component we could focus on. There are government incentives and rebates available if you do affordable housing. Because I think Mabrook should also not just be greedy and trying to just generate the best amount of revenue, because Mabrook's name was, founded on barakah. When we started Mabrook, we said we want barakah in what we do. To get barakah in what you do, your entire process must be clean and with good intentions. You cannot have Allah's barakah if you do something with bad intentions, or you are not merciful to people, or if you're thinking only about yourself. To get barakah, it's an entire process. So you must make sure that your entire chain of processes is done with good intentions and for the sake of Allah. And it doesn't have anything that is fishy or dubious, because then there'll be barakah. Even if we do, let's say, affordable housing projects, right? People may think, oh, you're not going to get the best return. No, but we'll get barakah in that return. And I think, but of course, that doesn't mean we shouldn't do other housing projects. We should, but I think we shouldn't just solely focus on, just regular projects. Affordable doesn't mean housing for poor people. It's just that housing is so expensive in Canada because of the demand that even if you make a good salary, you need two people working, or maybe even three people working in a household just to make rent, right? Because it's so expensive. And there's no reason why we can't address, a regular middle-class person being able to afford rent. You can do affordable housing because there's incentives and rebates and all kinds of programs the federal government and provincial governments have to help build affordable housing, So housing, of course, rental housing, affordable housing, industrial are the three categories right now which somebody can invest in. There's other areas as well, but right now these are the hot ones for sure.
Turning our focus on a specific location, could you share the insights on regions or cities in Canada that hold promise for real estate investments?
Certainly. Every major city in Canada is right now good to invest. Anything around the major cities: Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, Vancouver. However, having said that, the barrier to entry is high in the big markets because it's really expensive. Toronto, Vancouver are very expensive markets globally, even, right? So if you are within an hour's driving distance, you can invest in any market within an hour's driving distance of the major cities, and you will see good returns. You'll have land which is relatively cheaper, and at the same time, the returns may be good. So right now, like even our company, we're focusing on smaller municipalities that have housing problems, because the smaller municipalities are very welcoming as well. They want people to invest in them, and they're within driving distances to either jobs or employment or whatever. So because I'm more focused in Ontario, I can say anywhere within 2 hours of Toronto is good. Anywhere within 2 hours of Vancouver is good. Anywhere within 1 hour of Montreal is good. Anywhere within 1 hour of Ottawa is good. So, yeah, I mean, any major city, even Eastern Canada, which has typically had smaller metropolitan areas, like in Nova Scotia, you have Halifax and St. John's, and Fredericton, in New Brunswick. Those areas, they have housing problems. I mean, they need housing. So you can basically go anywhere, which is a major city in Canada, and you can invest and you'll find demand. So at the moment, Mabrook is looking at primarily Ontario. Being a younger venture that we are, we don't want to spread ourselves thin. We want to prove ourselves first and build up a portfolio that is consistent. And it's better to do it in a market which you know, or where you're present, right? And where you have more control. Once we have, delivered these returns and built up a track record, we certainly not only plan to go Canada-wide, but also the US. The US is a much bigger market, and the US also has a lot more incentives under the Biden administration for housing and other sectors as well, much more so than Canada. And being Canadian, we have access to US markets. So, we have easy access to US markets at any time. So I think our goal is not to be just limited to Canada or just Ontario. But I think at the moment, we're focusing on Ontario and the Toronto area in general.
This leads me to ask you my last question, and I believe it's the most important question. Addressing a common concern, how would you respond to individuals who might view Mabrook as just another startup and express hesitation about taking risk? I believe that sharing your perspective could provide a clarity on what sets Mabrook apart and why it's worth considering as an investment opportunity.
I mean, we're the word startup, but we're different than a different startup, that we are not manufacturing a product that we're going to sell, and we don't know what this product is going to do, how the market will receive it. We're a startup of an investment company primarily. And like I said, yes, we're focusing on real estate right now, but our goal right now is to go out there and find areas where people can invest their money in a halal way, in a Sharia compliant way, and get return. So, and by pooling those resources using, what blockchain and technology and tokenization offers. So really, we are a conduit. We're only investing in ventures that make sense, right? So we're investing in, let's say, like if we talk about real estate, we're investing in residential projects right now, which makes sense in the Canadian market. We might invest in industrial projects, which currently make sense in the Canadian market. So the products, the projects and products that we're investing in are not risky themselves. There are people where people are investing at the moment, but the average person cannot invest. Let's say if you have $1,000 you can't really buy a real estate asset, right? But to you, that $1,000, if it generates to you a good return, within a couple of years, and you would not be able to get that return by putting it into a saving account, even if it's a halal saving account, but you can't do much with it. And I think that's where the beauty of Mabrook comes in, is that we are investing in things which already somebody is investing in. So if we're investing in real estate, we're going to be investing in asset classes of real estate which are booming. If we go and buy, let's say tomorrow, a different venture, or we invest in, let's say, a certain kind of other asset class, we would be investing in something that is more known. You know what I mean? We wouldn't be investing in, let's say, startup companies ourselves. You know what I mean? Like or startup venture that has no proven track record, because that's not our goal. Our goal is to provide halal, stable returns to our investors. It's not about where can I make them the biggest bang for the buck, but take a huge amount of risk. That's not what Mabrook's model is. There are people who do that. They invest in things and they triple their money in a couple of months, or in a year or whatever. Yeah, but they also come with risks. That's not our goal. Our goal is, go after things which are more stable, more known, but people don't have access to those investments because they may or may not have the capital. But we, as an investment company, provide access to that through a pool of people's resources, right? So at our core, we are a fund. At our core, we're basically like a big, I don't want to use the word hedge fund, but we are like a fund, basically. We have money and we invest. Right now, we're investing, a small group of people's money, which is I'm part of the investors. We have other investors, and and our hope is to take that and bring it to the larger masses, and not take very, very risky ventures that are no proven track record, which I can't even analyze myself. Like I don't even know what's going to happen with it, right? So that's why that's why we're focusing also on real estate right now. We're like, what? Right now in Canada, especially, real estate is the most stable way to invest your money. And let's focus on that, where we know, and also in real estate, let's focus in areas where we know there's demand. Let's not go buy office buildings because, nobody wants to go to the office anymore. We all want to work from home. So why would I build an office building? But I know that, I'm going to have a hard time renting it, so things like that, you just basically focus on stable things instead of unstable, risky ventures.
Thank you very much, Mr. Atif, for your valuable time. Your insights have provided a deeper understanding of companies' vision and approach. And thank you very much for all of you who are listening to this. We'll catch up soon in another conversation.